It's not just Abdullah Hamdok. Other civilian leaders freed after Sunday's deal. The head of Sudan's Congress Party, Omar al-Dajir, telling the French news agency AFP earlier that after his release that he had been cut off from the world in solitary confinement ever since last month's coup. Keris Garland has more on a post-coup moment where there's a lot of unease, particularly as the death toll continues to rise.
Chanting, "Power is for the people," protesters in Sudan rejected a deal between the country's military and prime minister. The pact reinstated Abdullah Hamdok as civilian PM almost 1 month after he was ousted by the military. Hamdok had been a hero of the protest movement, but on Sunday lost much of that support.
كل الهتافات قلبت ضد حمدوك لأنه بالحاجة العملة دي هو خان الشارع شايف إنه هو خان الشارع خان المواثيق اللي بيننا وبينه إنه يا أخي حكومة مدنية تم تسليم السلطة للمدنيين.
ما بنقبل بأي تسوية أو حكومة يعين برهان يطلع برا المشهد السياسي.
After being under house arrest since the October 25 coup, Hamdok signed the deal with military leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan at the presidential palace. The 14-point deal promises the release of civilian leaders who were detained when the army seized power. Sudan has seen mass demonstrations since the coup, and medics aligned with the protest movement say more than 40 civilians have been killed in violent crackdowns. Hamdok said he agreed to the deal to prevent more casualties.
هذا الاتفاق يساعد على فك الاختناق. نتمنى فك الاختناق الداخلي والخارجي ونستعيد مسار الانتقال لتحقيق ديمقراطية مستدامة في بلدنا.
Hamdok had been appointed to lead a transitional government after longtime leader Omar al-Bashir was ousted in April 2019. His reinstatement and the agreement with Burhan was welcomed by both the African Union and the United Nations. Pro-democracy groups, however, are maintaining calls for full civilian rule without military involvement.
Muzan, Alneel, internet restored, civilian leaders freed from jail. What's in this deal, though?
Well, I think it's important to say that what happened yesterday was a historic and almost comical PR failure by the military coup team, which Mr. Abdullah Hamdok recently chose to join. The agreement is no different from the demands made by the coup leader, General Burhan, on his first press conference after the coup, where he announced that he plans to change the cabinet and keep Hamdok as prime minister of the coup government. And that is what happened. The agreement also totally removed the FFC from the power sharing setup. And as the Sudanese people have experienced over the past 2 years, we clearly saw that power cannot be shared. Full power was always at the hands of the military, and it is now still at the hands of the military, just without the facade of the so-called civilian leadership. The announcement of the agreement, as was shown in your report, was during the previously planned Millions March, which was called for and organized by the resistance committees. The choice of the time ensures that all the parties involved in this coup and in this agreement are quite ignorant about the reality in the streets. While announcing it at any different time might have caused some confusion between the public and maybe bought the coup some time, both the government and the coup's prime minister. This choice of time facilitated the process of organic popular consensus building. Within seconds from the news, the protesters in the streets, as you heard in your report, were chanting against Hamdok. The chant that we just heard was Hamdok and Naya Shari Hay, which can be translated to Lawzi Hamdok, the streets are alive. The coup leaders and all those who welcomed the deal after that, they insist on ignoring the resistance committees as a major and player, and currently the main political voice represented in the streets, the main political voice leading and planning the protests and even putting out demands. They've put out a set of 7 demands, one of which is total removal of the military from the political process. But I have to say that reports such as the one we just heard, where they are represented vaguely as pro-democracy protesters is not helping anyone to understand the reality and be able to anticipate the reaction from the streets. This is an organized resistance and should be dealt with as an organized resistance with clear demands.
An organized resistance with a leadership, with a new head, because wasn't there public opinion just last week on this very show? We had people telling us, oh, well, I had my hesitancy about Hamdok, but he's under house arrest. He's stood up so far to the military. Now, if you're saying that everyone's turning against Hamdok, who's the leader?
It's clearly the leader are the resistance committees, and their compass is their demand. Just before the agreement, Hamdok was still at the side of a civilian government, and that's how the people saw it in the streets, and thereby they stood behind him because he represented a path towards their demands. It's not about him as a political brand or a name, and that needs to be clear to the international community as well, who seem to believe that just returning Hamdok can bring stability to the country. It's clear that the only thing that can bring stability to the country is to satisfy the clear demands of the people, including but not limited to the total removal of military from the political scene.